Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. So today's episode is actually a live workshop that I just conducted, and the subject of the workshop is triumphing over disruption. And I won't say much in advance of the workshop because it's pretty self-explanatory, and I actually explain it in some depth in the beginning, but I'll just say that it's a continuation of the subject of the last 3 weeks, which has been really how do we flourish or come as close to possible as flourishing during this time of massive disruption. And in today's episode / workshop, I talk about a tool that I've created to help with this. And I actually had about 25 people there live who worked through the tool with me and who shared some of their answers to some of the prompts on the tool. So I found this very valuable. I think some of them did as well. And I hope that you learn a lot and apply the tool for yourself. I will be sharing the outline, including the Triumphing Over Disruption tool, so that you can utilize it. Let me know what you think of it, and hope you enjoy the workshop, and I'll be with you on the other side. All right, let us get started, and thanks everybody for coming here. So you can see I gave this outline, which will hopefully help you retain the content, and it'll give you a sense of where we're going. So I want to start off with why I am doing this. And I don't usually do this, but I want to start off with what I'm not doing, since there's a certain kind of thing that this might resemble that I'm very against. And what I'm very against is people for whom the current situation is not nearly as disruptive. I'm very against them telling stories about how great it is to catch up on Netflix and this kind of thing, or like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I get to spend more time with people, et cetera, et cetera. Now because this is going to be all about making the best of a situation, but I think stuff like that trivializes the destruction that's happening. So I just want to make very clear, it's not at all about diminishing the disruption and the pain and the loss. And in fact, I believe that acknowledging that as part of the situation, but it is about giving you tools to triumph over it. And I find the concept of triumph very, very helpful. So with that out of the way, I want to first start out by a concept I've talked about on Human Flourishing Project before, which is and I'd encourage, by the way, everyone to show your video if you're at all willing, since I asked that in advance, but if not, you can still stay. So the 12 areas of life, and I've done 11 and 10, and this is kind of the most comprehensive version. So I like to think when I'm planning my life and evaluating my life, I like to think of it in 3 broad categories: foundations, activities, and companions. And so foundations these are the foundations. These are the things that are sort of always present. And then and I'll go into those first. So I think of those as resources, environment, physical health, and mental health. So by resources, I mean, basically, how much money you have, what other kind of physical material resources you have at your disposal. And that situation is going to color everything else about life. It doesn't determine everything else, but it's obviously a big deal. And in a time like this, more obviously a big deal than ever. Environment is where you live. That's your personal environment, your home, the broader area that you live in, et cetera. And obviously, we're having a lot of changes in that right now. It's very restricted. Physical health, that's pretty obvious. And then mental health. So these are the foundational things. And then with activities, I divide it up into creation. So that's productive work. Recreation, which is like you can think of it as leisure. Rejuvenation, which is how do you restore yourself, which is related to recreation, but not quite the same thing. So I think of things like sleep and meditation in that category. And then reflection, I just added this one, but this is thinking at life about a high level, which I think is a big, not the most time-consuming activity in life, but it is still a big activity. And then companions, I like dividing it up into activities and companions because I think about, okay, this is what I like to do. And then in many of the cases, I like to do it with other people. And so you can divide this up different ways, but you can think of it as your partner, your family, your friends, and your coworkers. So I'm going to use this throughout today, but the first thing I want to say about it is that most of us, at least most Americans, I don't know about most on this call, but most Americans have massive disruptions in many of these areas. if not most. So I would just take my own example very quickly, which I've talked about on the show. I mean, in terms of resources, I'm a lot of my business is in the events business and speaking. So definitely the situation is massively disruptive to my business. Plus, I do a lot of work in oil and gas, and among other things, there's much lower demand for that. So that hurts all that aspect of the business. And no, indirectly, this is happening to everybody and many people directly, particularly anyone whose business is involved in-person interaction. Certainly, a lot of the service sector environment. I live in Laguna Beach, which is a place I really love, but it's incredibly restricted. I'm supposed to be in my home all the time. I'm allowed to go to the grocery store, maybe walk on the street, and the beaches are closed and the trails are closed. So, and I think most people have the same thing. And physical health, I mean, it's much, much harder to get exercise. I used to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You're not allowed to do that. Mental health, I mean, it's such a hard, all of these things have really big mental health implications, and it's easy to spiral down in these kinds of situations in terms of depression, anxiety, being worried about the future, and fill in the blanks. All of these things can be very difficult, and I'm sure some of you have the same kind of situation. So then this question of, okay, what do we do about it? We're proactive people. We believe in human flourishing. And I think the first impulse, and this is under the challenges of trying to minimize disruption, is to say, like, how do I minimize the damage? So how do I, like, okay, this sucks, certain things suck, but how do I make it suck less? Like if I'm running a business, okay, how do I minimize my losses? If I lose my exercise, how do I do something that's not as good, but it's at least something? And that's definitely, I think, a good kind of inclination, but I found it had a lot of challenges with it. And so one is, if I'm just minimizing destruction or disruption or both, it's pretty depressing because it's just, okay, well, I had my old life and now I'm just living some shell of it. And it's just a question of how big a shell. And then another thing is that sometimes something that's being disrupted or damaged, sometimes it doesn't work at all. And so you can't even really minimize the damage. So for example, I do live speaking, in-person speaking. That's not a business at all right now, almost anywhere. So it's like, to think of that in terms of minimizing doesn't uh, doesn't really work. Or even like swimming in the ocean, or at least swimming at Laguna Beach, like you're not allowed to do that right now. You could get arrested for that. And then the other thing is that if we're thinking about the future, there can be this impulse to say, okay, this is just a temporary thing. I'm going to minimize the disruption now, but in the future, I'll be totally like, I'm going to go back. But the thing is, we don't know what the future is for a whole bunch of types of reasons. And Dan Sullivan, a guy I'm a big fan of, the guy who created Strategic Coach, he was talking the other day about how he thinks of it in terms of there's the old normal, and then in the future, there's the new normal. And right now, we're in what he calls scary times, which is this time of uncertainty. But the new normal, in many ways, isn't going to look like the old normal. And some of that might even be improvements. I think a lot of it might be worse. But we don't even know what the future is like. So it's not even necessarily we have the option to just, okay, I'm going to do a shell of the former thing, and then on the other side, I get back to doing it. It maybe like live events is a very different business, just to take that example, because I think about it a lot. It's a very different business. And it may be if you're in restaurants, like that's a very different situation in the future than it was in the past. And so then this leads me to think, okay, well, is there a better approach than minimizing? And that's the topic today, triumphing over disruption. So I'll start out with an observation that I think many of us have seen and hopefully experienced ourselves, which is there are sometimes we're noticing benefits that we're gaining from the situation. I think one thing I've heard a lot of people notice is they find themselves getting increased connection with distant people. So because of the use of Zoom, for example, and these virtual things, sometimes we'll connect with people we didn't normally connect with. And for me, the most prominent example is my immediate family. We've started playing like a board game once a week. And there's 6 of us, plus my girlfriend and my brother-in-law, so kind of 8 of us. And we would never do that. I mean, I would talk to my parents every couple weeks, and I would talk to my sisters usually more frequently than that. But family things we would do once or twice a year. And now we've done it once a week. And that for us seems to be a good rhythm. And it's just, oh wow, that was actually an improvement that happened. So my life is better in this one respect. And that really makes me think, well, how much is this possible? Like, how far can we take this idea of I'm actually going to leverage the situation to make my life better? And again, it's not that to diminish the negative or to say, oh, the situation is fine, you can make it better, but it's to really push ourselves and say, well, given the situation, can we somehow use this as the raw material or even inspiration to create something way better in the different areas of life, including the 12 areas of life? And so the big question I'm thinking about and want to talk about today is, with any given area, how can I make this area better than it was before? So an area that is getting worse, how can I actually make it better? Or at least how can I make some aspect of it better? How can I triumph over the disruption? And one thing I've talked about on the podcast is like there are two types of benefits, at least, that can be derived from disruptions. So one is that disruptions, they cause a lot of pain, but part of the pain is that they expose mistakes or shortcomings or areas for improvement that already existed. So I use the example of business with this, where I think a lot of people I've talked to who are entrepreneurs, they'll say, yeah, you know what? Like I could have managed my cash flow better. I wasn't prepared for something like this. And in the future, they can take action to be more prepared. And versus some entrepreneurs I know who got killed in, let's say, 2008, like they have incredible balance sheets. And I was talking to someone the other day and he says, this was from something actually 25 years ago. And he said, yeah, I can run 220 days with zero sales. Not that I would let that happen, but that's something most businesses can't do. And so what he used the information from the disruption to expose areas for improvement. So that's one kind of benefit we can derive. And the other is just that disruption often inspires creativity, or we can have it inspire creativity. So this is something where we're in a situation, I really wish we weren't in it. If any of you follow my commentary, I disagree with a lot of the policies. I think it's the wrong way of approaching a very serious situation, but that's not the topic today. But what I have most control over is myself. And I was thinking that if I'm going through all of this, I know a lot more people are going through this. So I thought it might be fun to try to connect with people who follow my work, particularly who follow the Human Flourishing Project, and to do some kinds of brainstorming. So before I'm going to go into the Triumph Over Disruption tool, which is the main subject of the workshop, but before that, any questions that anyone has about what I've said so far, and just feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you have any questions. All right. Well, hopefully that means it's clear. We will see. So the next page of this is the core of what I want to talk about, which is this is going to be the interactive part. So, which is the Triumph Over Disruption tool. So this is my first effort at formalizing a tool that helps us think about the situation. So I'll do it at a high level and then go into the details. So there are basically 4 steps. One is acknowledge the disruption. So what sucks in this realm? Be creative. And I'll go into that a little bit more. Outline the actions in terms of my best idea, and then create the conditions. So I'll use an example. I apologize if this is repetitive, but if you've heard my podcast, but I'll use an example, which is my favorite example so far that I've come up with, which, although I realized it just got destroyed again. So I have to figure out a new thing, but this was how I dealt with finding both recreational activities and exercise. So for me, if we just take the realm of recreation, what sucked in this realm, I mean, one thing is not being allowed to go in the ocean and not being allowed to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I had a really good routine where I really love going to the ocean. I love doing jiu-jitsu. It was super easy to do. It was a good break from things. I didn't have to psych myself up to do it. It was a great part of my routine. And then that was gone. And so I think it's important to say, like, that sucks and it's bad. And I wish it were not the case. And I hope it can return to be the case. And so then, okay, but then the question is, what could I possibly do that would make this area of life, or at least some part of it, better than it was before? And that is a hard kind of thing to think about, because especially if there's something you really love and you just can't do it, you pick that thing out for a reason. So it's not the easiest thing, but here are some questions to prompt thinking. And as I'm talking about this, I want you to start thinking about in the realm of, I want to start with recreation. Start thinking about your own answers. So here are 3 prompts that I find helpful. What have you always wanted to do in this area? And so then there's a question of, can you do this thing now in one form or another? What has always bothered you in this area? And what has worked in the past that you stopped doing? So for me, one thing I've always wanted to do in the area of recreation is surf, because I've loved snowboarding for 20 years. I ride one wheel, which is a kind of electric skateboard, and I love the ocean. So it stands to reason that I would really like surfing, but I always had the excuse that I'm a safe swimmer, but I'm not a great swimmer. And I thought, oh, you have to be a great swimmer. And so I just procrastinated on it and never got around to it. But then it occurred to me, well, you know what? If I could do surfing, that would be really cool. Like that would make my life. I mean, I might even like that more than the other things. And now I know I couldn't go surfing at my local beach, but I knew that some beaches were open. So if I could actually go surfing at another beach and learn to surf, like that would add something to my life where I didn't have that before. And then my life might not be as good overall now, even my recreational life, but it'll be way better than it would be. And then the future life will be better. So what I did uh, with that one was, I just thought about, okay, what's necessary to do it? And kind of step one is, okay, I need to find a surf instructor. I need to find an ocean, and I need to find a board. And I happened to have a friend I had reconnected with named Kobe Dubois, and I had seen him the past couple of months. He had offered to take me surfing, and I had procrastinated on it. And so I just reached out to him and say, hey, I want to go surfing. And this relates to create the conditions. What can I do that will make it more likely that I'll take these actions? I'm really big on creating conditions. And I thought, you know what, if I just text him and say, let's set a date to go surfing, everything else will fall into line. Like I know that if I text him and I say I'm going to go, I'm going to go. And then I know if I go to the beach with a board, I know I'm going to go in the water, and then I'm going to at least try. And then if I try, I'll at least get a sense whether this is the potential. So it was, acknowledging the disruption, being creative, which came up with a bunch of ideas, but surfing was one of them, then made this little plan and then created the conditions. And I've since gone 3 times, and it was really fun. And it was this amazing feeling that I could take a situation that was bad and I could triumph over it. We went to San Clemente Beach, which was open. And then I just learned today that it's closed. So now I got to figure out a new thing, but at least I have that experience. And at least now I'm a quote surfer, as Covey would say, you're a philosopher, which I don't know if that expression has been used before, but I thought that was cute. So what I want to do for the bulk of this is to actually go through these exercises. And so I want to going to have about a 5-minute time where you go through this exercise. So first in the realm of recreation, and then I want some of you to share some of your answers, and then we'll talk about those. And then we'll go into the realm of creation. And then, so 2 of the 12 areas. And then if we have time, we can go into more, or we can do questions. But first, before we go into recreation, does anyone have any questions about my example or about the broader tool? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Hey, Alex, it's Emmanuel. Good to see you.
Hey.
I'm not sure how important this is, so maybe this isn't worth spending any time on. But the analogies you provided earlier, like particularly the runway analogy with a startup, I've been chewing on since you made that comment. Like as different example, if my house burns down and I didn't previously have home insurance, that might tell me moving forward, great, I should probably have home insurance. But my life isn't better. I just am correcting a previous error that I made. And in the same way that not having ample cash reserves in economic recession exposes the fact that, hey, I should have higher cash reserves. So I'm wrestling. Maybe going through this exercise will help kind of resolve this problem in my mind. But I'm like, yeah, I loved going to my gym in FiDi. It's an awesome gym. The best I can hope to do is get back to where I was before, not like exceed that. This is a very long, rambling answer, but that's kind of what I've been wrestling with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me take that. I think that's a good example, and so I think the financial one is a great one, and I was going to talk about it a little bit under creation, but let's talk about it now. So I'll give you my own perspective on this, because it's one kind of the the perfect kind of answer would be, hey, I just came up with an idea and I just made $5 million on the idea. And so I triumphed over disruption, right? That's a fantasy. And some people will do that, and that'll be interesting. I definitely haven't done that. But what my experience, and I haven't found a way to make yet even more money than I was making before. But what I have done is in terms of, I don't want to go too much into my specific business, but in terms of like my thinking now about costs and how to plan for different costs and fixed costs versus variable costs, just my understanding of that and the decisions I've made and the decisions I'm making going forward, the level of awareness I have about the business and about what makes sense and about decision making is way higher. And so even now I have, in a sense, more security just because I have more visibility into what's happening. So even when things were more flush, there's something in the back of my mind where, yeah, I don't fully have this planned out. Like I don't really have contingency plans, worst case scenario plans, whereas now I have a worst case scenario plan. And that's really reassuring. And so now not only will it be way better in the future, but it's better now because I have more control over the situation. I think this can be true with a lot of people in terms of savings and whatnot, where it's like if somebody really adopts a new process, like set of processes and a new mindset with regard to money, there's a power of that now just really being on top of it and being in control, plus the benefits in the future. Now, in some cases, it may be you can't think of something that you would consider a net improvement in any area, but the purpose of this is just to give the exercise to entertain it, because in some of these areas there is going to be some breakthrough. And even you say you have a gym in the financial district that you love, it's like, okay, maybe there is maybe there is something that you would like more, where I don't know how, I mean, for me, I treat myself as allowed to go outside. And I mean, the police have not arrested me for being outside. So, if you're really like forced to sit next to your toilet all day, like at a certain point, it's going to be impossible. I mean, if they put you in a concentration camp, like at a certain point, you have fewer and fewer options. Although even there, you have people like Viktor Frankl who are like improving their minds in certain situations there. But even with jujitsu, which is one thing I've struggled a lot with, like one thing is, okay, there's a particular jiu-jitsu fighter named Rafael Mendez, whom I really love watching him fight in the gi. He's my favorite fighter in the gi that's the uniform in the last 10 years. And I got to say, you know what? I'm going to, like, at least part of my experience will be better because I'm just going to sort of impulsively allow myself to watch his videos. And I wasn't doing that before. And so I was just doing that last night, and that was really fun. So that's an example. Other questions? That was a good question. Okay, well, let's get to work. So we're going to spend 5 more minutes. And if you get through, so you can do more than one idea for recreation, or you can jump to creation, or you can jump to any other area. But I figured we would work as a group on these 2 areas because there will probably be more similarities we'll probably help each other more if we're working on the same kinds of areas. Okay, so at about 3:32, we will resume. And if you have any questions for me, I'm going to be here. So if you have any questions for me, just unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so who wants to volunteer? And by the way, I should warn you, so the way I said, I'm recording the audio of this. And I ask everyone to be on video. I'm not sharing the video of it, so no one will know you're here if you don't talk. But if you do talk, you will be immortalized on the podcast unless you say something I really dislike, and then I will remove it. But just to be warned. So maybe that's exciting to you, maybe it's not. But so does anyone want to jump in with an example of theirs? And I actually just thought of it. I worked out a new example of mine too. So, but I want to hear from others. So anyone want to volunteer first?
Are you looking specifically for recreation?
Yeah, well, let's at least start there because I think there will be some interesting commonalities. Anyone have any? Yes, raising your hand. Mary Aline.
Yeah. I've been looking for a drawing class, and of course there are no live drawing classes now. So, but I'm on the mailing list for an art gallery, and I noticed that they had an email about possible Zoom classes. And I guess you could say this just fell into my lap, except that I was watching for it. And I emailed them back and I said, yes, I'm really interested in your drawing classes via Zoom. And we emailed back and forth a couple of times. And they've only got 3 people, but we start Monday at 6 p.m. And I'm going to be taking 3 drawing classes, beginning drawing, which is something I've wanted to do because I retired recently and I have been really interested in doing this. And so it's going to happen. They even arranged for me, they had a list of the supplies I needed. And all I had to do was just place an online order with a art store near them. And that's all going to be delivered to me.
Wow. So I'm curious, is that something you think would you still have done this even if there hadn't been the lockdown, or is something about this situation prompting it?
I would have still done it. Yes.
Okay.
I've been intending, I took a class a few years ago and then I just got too busy really to have the time with my job. So for a long, long time, I've been intending to do this when I retired. And so, yeah, it was something I was going to do. Absolutely.
Great. All right. Anyone else want to share? Yes. Tomer.
Sure. There's been a couple of things for me where I'd say on the recreation side, this has been a positive in a sense.
Well, actually, let's start off with just going through. So what's the negative? Like, what has
I've lost my
the
job.
disruption?
So I've lost my job. I'm out of work. My income is gone, and so there's all the worries that come with that. So on the professional side, it's bad, and certainly as well on the I don't get to see my friends. I don't get to go out to restaurants, which is true of everybody. So.
No, but I think it's important to acknowledge. Yeah.
So I
recreation.
acknowledge that. So when I say what's been positive about the recreation, I had been exercising, trying to get in better shape. I had always imagined that when I retire someday, far into the future, I'll be able to go for long walks and listen to books all day. And every day now I do some resistance exercise kind of early in the morning and go for at least a 2.5 hour walk while listening to audiobooks. And I made it a routine. Today was a particularly cold day, but I just wore many layers and I went off and did that. And that's something that's really nice. And it clears the mind and it gets me, I think a lot of what you were saying earlier, I'm having that reflection around how do you make the best out of the situation and accept it for what it is while it is. And so I've lost a lot of stuff on the recreation side, but I've been able to do some things that I've always hope to do, and I'm actually able to experience them and say, you know what, these particular things I actually do enjoy doing, and I actually do enjoy the results that I get from them.
Great. Any new ideas come to mind today as we're going through this?
In terms of what else I might do, it's certainly more on the professional side. So when you come back on the creative side.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Jennifer.
So one thing that I'm acknowledging really sucks is all of our mountains are closed. I'm a skier. I've invested a lot of money this year in getting my kids there.
Where are you?
I'm in Huntington Beach. But
okay.
I've been going to Mammoth.
Oh.
So Mammoth and June are closed. Big Bear's closed. We went out to Colorado. That's closed too. So I've got the kids their own ski gear, snowboard gear. We have season passes. So we're really missing out on that. And what sucks even more is I'd invested a lot in lessons for them this year. So they were getting pretty good, almost independent. And we had plans to go back up over spring break. And of course, those are not happening. So I've been feeling pretty bummed about that. One thing though that I'm sort of spinning this into is I have always wanted to spend more time hiking in the mountains with my kids. I very often will get a babysitter on a weekend and I'll go off on my own for, 4, 5, 6 hours. And I've been doing that pretty regularly for the last 3 years. So our mountains here in Southern California are also closed now. The trails, the parking lots, the trailheads, everything's closed. So what I've been doing instead is I've been really training with the kids. We're going on long walks. They're riding their scooters. They're riding bikes. We're also going to our local, I found this equestrian center, dog park. It's kind of off trail. It's in Huntington Beach. We've been going there a couple times a week. So it's only a few miles. But it's something that I'm able to do with them to get them into shape where they can do longer hikes. And actually about a week and a half ago, we did their first little mountain with 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So they're young. That was a pretty big win for them. That was pretty challenging. So that's kind of one area that's improved. And I hope that I'm able to keep doing that. It's always tempting to just, do bigger, harder things on my own. So I'm making the investment in my family and getting them more excited about going hiking with me.
Great. Any new ideas occur to you today?
Well, yes. One other thing I should be doing. I like to trail run. I don't like to run on pavement, but trail running isn't super possible right now
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. So I need to kind of suck it up and still keep training so I don't lose that fitness.
So are there any conditions you can think of to make that happen? Because it sounds like there's resistance around that.
Yeah. So I need to do it, maybe getting up earlier so I can do it before their Zoom school classes start, or kind of carving out time in the day. I'd say that's the biggest challenge.
Cool. One thing I've found, with my skateboarding or my one wheeling, like I have the same issue because I'm in Orange County and I love to ride in the mountains, although they don't even allow me to do that technically, but I can't, it's hard to find places to ride now. So one thing I've done is just be really deliberate about, okay, I'm going to figure out some way to challenge myself on the streets. And so like one thing is there's a steep hill where I live that I hadn't gone up before. And I just thought, what, I'm going to take on a slight bit more risk because it's going to be really stimulating. Then I went up this hill and I found this amazing park that is actually not closed right now. And there's so much satisfaction in just these little triumphs.
Mhm.
And part of it, I get a certain satisfaction in thinking, insofar as I think people like locking down, I get a certain satisfaction in triumphing over them, although that may not be as healthy. Anyone else want to share ones that you've had? Let's see, Mike.
Hi, Alex.
Hey.
Love your work. So what stinks for us is we can't get together with our friends. We're not big party goers. We like to gather in small groups, and that usually revolves around dinner, either at a restaurant or at somebody's home. And what we found, or what we're actually going to find tonight at 6:30, is we're going to host our very first Zoom dinner party, whereby 4 couples are going to turn on Zoom. We're all going to make our own meals, drink our own wine or whatever our choice of beverage is, clean up our own mess, and not go to any great expense, which is usually incurred when hosting or going out and over consuming. So that's what we're doing.
Great. That sound like that was already planned in advance? Any ideas occur to you today?
Yeah, well, yes. I just realized while we were talking on the phone that my son and his wife live in Austin, Texas, and we don't get to see them as much as we'd like to. So, this type of party, we'll see what happens tonight, and we'll figure out what went right, what didn't go very right, and then we'll invite my son and his wife to our next Zoom dinner and see where that goes.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I'm finding my closest friends are quite distributed. So some are in San Francisco, some are in Kansas now, actually, of all places. And it's been really cool with our friends in Kansas, and including my best friend is there. We would, like, when he'd be there, he and I have a good routine. We actually talk 3 times a week, which I'm proud to say I had that in advance of this. So that's nice. But even I didn't have the in-person, and his wife, I didn't get to see her very often at all. And so it's just, now I realize, oh my gosh, we can see you guys every 2 weekends if we want to. So it's really cool. Luca, you raised your hand the digital way. So what do you have to say?
Hi there, Alex and all. I see a bunch of friends here who are part of our Objectivist Voices Toastmasters Club. And that's an interesting experience that I need to bring forward, in that our club, which focuses on Ayn Rand philosophy, in fact, only meets virtually through Zoom over the last couple of years, ever since we started. And that experience, I hadn't realized, but it came very handy in this transition to an abrupt stop of our in-person physical meetings of the club I run here in Lausanne, Switzerland, where I live. And it turned out that that experience proved extremely useful and successful in the abrupt transition we went through. So I was able to take an experience that I had previously, that I just, okay, it's a club, we meet online, that's it. But unbeknownst to me, I had gathered quite a high level of experience that I could translate and reflect onto my other friends around here in Europe. And of course, as you know, Europe has been taken by storm earlier than the US in this whole mess. Luckily, here in Switzerland, we do not really have a lockdown. We can still go out, but any gathering of more than 5 people and most shops are closed. So, there's still a lot of government intervention in our lives. And I have to also reflect on the words that our president of Objectivist Voices, Eileen Skeen, said the other day during our meeting, when she mentioned this term, social distancing, is actually wrong, and it's terribly toxic in that we should be really physical distant, not socially distant. And it pleases me a great deal to hear out of the stories of our fellows before me that we're really enhancing, in a way, our social closeness to other people, using the tools that technology gives us for free in most cases, to our pleasure to some degree. Of course, hoping that the same level of deeper social interaction we have electronically can turn out to be a more deep way to interact when life becomes to normal, whenever that will be.
Great. I want to jump into creation. We can bring up more examples of this, but yeah, I think the connection point is a really good one, and it's the kind of cliche example right now, but it is a good example, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to try it in this format, because I was in a workshop the other day, and it was with people I usually see in person, and it was really cool. I realized, wow, I missed these people. It would have sucked had I not seen them this quarter. And then I thought, well, I have a whole bunch of people that I know, some of whom I've never even seen in person. So it would be fun. And I do like it. So it'll be something I probably do in the future. So let's take about 3 minutes, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk, but go through the exercise with creation. And so just a couple notes about this. So just anything in the productive realm. One thing to think about with these questions. So there's, what have you always wanted to do? That's a good one. What has always bothered you in this area? I think that can help a lot here. What has worked in the past that you stopped doing? That's one I find is really useful in creative, different kinds of activities. So for me, I mentioned on the previous episode of the podcast, for me, one of the things I've had on my mind for a while is I want to be doing more public content. Of course, I've done some with Human Flourishing Project, but I hadn't done my podcast for many, many months. And I had been working on a book and then doing a lot of behind the scenes consulting work. And when there was less consulting work, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to do more public stuff. And in particular, I want to try doing TV again, because there are a whole bunch of benefits to that. And so that was, I don't want to go into my whole story about that, but that was a case where, yeah, this situation inspired that. And that's something I had been thinking about for a year or more and kind of complained about it or didn't feel like I had a way out. And then it sort of became necessary to be more public, or at least that was a big opportunity. And so I did it. But I mean, one thing to think about, because I know we're going to have a combination of people who are entrepreneurs and people who work for others, and there's being laid off, which just sucks. I mean, one thing to think about in this realm is just, if nothing else, like, what capabilities can I develop? And I'll tell you just a quick anecdote from talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs in the past week. And this is kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing, but the people, maybe this isn't a surprise, but like people who are running businesses, and most of these guys run way big businesses, certainly compared to what I run, their whole way of thinking is like, okay, now, we got to be really efficient. And so we want to really get the best employees, and we really like anyone who wasn't really performing. Now we don't need them. And sometimes they were performing and we're in the wrong business. But a lot of times it's half the people or 2/3 of the people we really want, and some we don't. And so one thing to just think about is, what capabilities can I develop so that I'm either hard to replace at my company or I'll be valuable going forward. So that's just a little prompt in case it's useful. All right. So 3 minutes, and then we'll go and hear your answers. Okay, let's get started. So if I want to focus on creation examples, but if you have others, feel free to share them, and focus particularly ideas that you're thinking of during this call, because then we can sort of push on, okay, what actions are necessary, what conditions are necessary, et cetera. So anyone want to go first? Boris, did you raise your hand?
Alex, not really,
Hey.
but I could.
Oh, okay,
I could
sorry, I
go.
didn't
I
mean
could
to
go. That's
cold
all right.
call you.
That's all right. That's all right. I think I have a decent one. By the way, love your work and thanks a lot for it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So what I was thinking about is I wouldn't say I always wanted to do this, but I think at least over the last few months, I really wanted to develop a course actually on how to make a good executive level PowerPoint deck. So it's
I
in
would
my
take
line
that.
of work. I spent some time in consulting. Now I'm working in strategy, business planning, and I see a huge amount of just horrible presentations that I mean, you're obviously an expert in this, but you would just see that they fall apart with the first page. Basically, there's no objective, there is no success criteria, there is no, fundamental assumptions that people are clear about. So I've really wanted to kind of structure a course that would teach, at least starting with my coworkers, that'll teach people how to do this, how to do a better job of that. And very similar to that, also probably a course in how to make a good Excel model that also develops a business case. So kind of a combination for those two, I think would benefit quite a lot of people in my company, but maybe in other companies as well.
So, okay, let's talk about it. So what do you need to do, and what conditions can you put in place? Because it sounds like a great idea. I would love to see that. I'm pretty mediocre at PowerPoint myself.
Sure, would love to. Would love to share.
What conditions can you put in
to.
place to make it happen?
Yeah, I mean that's the challenge. I don't need too much to be working on that, and of course, if you think about the current situation, it's not really affecting me that much. So I basically just need the kind of the headspace, the time, and the discipline to actually work on it. I guess on a regular basis. And what's been particularly challenging for me is that I feel a little bit kind of squeezed on both sides of the day, morning and evening, and work in between. I also have two young kids that obviously take a lot of time and attention. So it is quite challenging in that respect to actually find the time and the mental energy and the physical energy to get down and do this thing.
Interesting. Well, that'd be fun to. I have some more. I don't want to get too much into brainstorming about this, but one thing I want to highlight under create the conditions. What's the first item that goes on the calendar? I like thinking of that a lot. And when I'm brainstorming, I got to put something on my actual calendar. And I have an episode of HFP about calendar comprehensiveness, and then also one about time blocking, which is the gift that keeps on giving. And with that, I mean, I think that's so crucial right now as a higher level thing that if I could pick anything right now, it would probably be time blocking, calendar comprehensiveness, and then eliminating distractions, because particularly those of us who are the most disrupted, I mean, there's just the whole coronavirus thing constantly. And it's just the ability to schedule time deliberately in advance. I've just tried to become even more disciplined. But just one final thing there is one thing that I found useful for getting started on things is speaking. So one of the things I like about doing podcasting is I share my ideas in a useful form, but a kind of initial form. And then it's easier later to write about them or to do it more formally. And so it'd be interesting. You could even just speak to yourself sometime, even when you're tired, for half an hour, maybe just make a 5-minute outline and just say, okay, I'm going to explain to somebody how to do this. And then sometimes when you make progress, that starts to motivate it and it gains its own momentum. So just a couple of things to think about. Okay, I have until, by the way, I can go 10 minutes past 4. Obviously, people can leave anytime you want, but I want to go through as many of these examples as I can. So that was a great one. Thank you, Boris. Who else has one on creation? I know Amy, I think, was using the official hand raising thing. Is she gone? Amy, are you there? Oh, I hope I did not alienate her. I'm sure she had to go for some other reason. But Amy, so you can use the official hand raising thing, or you can actually just raise your hand, and I will look there only. Okay, Tomer.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Alex. So For me, when I was working beforehand, I had a number of interests that I wanted to pursue professionally, but there was just no time in the day because work consumed 24 hours, of my thinking time. Um, and one of the areas that I was really interested in, because I was in a company where we were working remotely for a few years. I was really interested in remote work. That wasn't the main point of it, but so one of the things that I started to do when I realized I was going to have a lot of free time was I began a survey to track people's attitudes towards working from home through the coronavirus crisis, because so many more people are suddenly working from home and using Zoom. And I shared my survey on LinkedIn, and I shared the results, and I'm trying to keep this thing going. Uh, but I was about to kind of lose my uh, perseverance at it, because I think the first week I got a few hundred responses. The second week I got just under 100 responses, and so I was wondering, well, maybe I'll leave this to other people. And I had some discouraging talks with a few HR people who said, well, somebody else is doing this, and and there's some things that you're leaving out of yours. But I figure for me, it's what I would have to put in the calendar to go with what you're saying, Alex, is make sure that I said that I would share results every Monday. So put in my calendar for Sunday to tabulate the results again, get out there, find something interesting to talk about, and continue to reach out to the network, in particular people who seemed interested and who shared and who exposed my survey to their contacts before. I don't know exactly how to do anything terribly creative with it yet, but it's an area to explore. And I have another area, but I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just kind of leave it with that one example.
I like that a lot. I mean, it's really good to just be in a game, and if you think you have something to say, to just keep pursuing it, and then if you decide there's something more important, then do it. I've had a similar or experience, at least this reminds me of, with the COVID-19, where I've felt like I started out and thought, what I need, like, there needs to be better thinking on this issue. I'm really upset, and I particularly want to know what some objectivists think about it, and I wish there was somebody who kind of could think about it the way that I could think about energy, and there is that in some ways, but and I just thought, I have something to say about this, and this is really important. And in a sense, it doesn't make any sense for me to talk about it, but I think it's important, and I think I have something valuable. So one thing I've just done is every week I've said something on my podcast about it, and I've developed my thinking, and I've taken interviews. And if I look the last 4 weeks, my thinking has developed a lot, and I'm now working on a written thing. And it's not completely overwhelming me time-wise, but it's just something where I think, what, I have an idea here. People might discourage it, but not that most people do, but some people might say, why are you wasting your time on that? Just write about energy. But it's like, I like pursuing it. And as long as I think there's something there, I'll keep pursuing it. Okay. Let's take a couple more. Mary Elaine.
This is just something I want to throw out that just occurred to me, because a couple people have talked about socializing online, and that's something that I've done with friends, where we have a potluck via Zoom. I think that, party planning is a big business, and I would be interested in seeing somebody do some party planning. There's got to be a market for party planning on Zoom, I would think, for ideas for how to do online parties.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the kind of thing you can, like, it's good to explore this. Even I'm curious with this, like everything I do, I'm always kind of curious. I think it's often think about it as like, hey, I think there's a way to create value. Let me start there and then see if there's something there, and then keep pursuing it. And I'm even thinking that with this kind of workshop, my first thought is, well, this would be valuable. I think this might be valuable to other people. Let's see. And I would enjoy doing it. And so what's the harm in trying it? I have no idea exactly what will come of it, but I think we're in a realm where there's so much that's changing, and there's going to be a lot of new opportunities to create value. And so if we feel like I have some insight into it and I can afford it, why not try to do it? And by the way, one thing is, then I'm very curious, and I'll say, people will hear this on the podcast too, but feel free after this to just email me, alex@alexepstein.com, and share anything you thought about this, what you thought worked well, what didn't, and particularly if you got anything from it, because I'm very interested in that, but I don't want to take the time now to do it, because I want to hear the ideas. What other ideas do people have?
Alex, I'd be happy to expand on the Zoom dinner party if you'd like. The first thing
Sure.
that needs to go on my calendar is I actually have to learn how to be a good Zoom host. I'm not particularly IT inclined, and so what I notice is some of these. This is maybe my 10th Zoom meeting. They're a little awkward to start and slow, and so I think that what I need to do is navigate my way around Zoom and see if I can come up with a really good detailed instruction sheet for future meetings.
Maybe you could share it with others too, because I'm like Dan Sullivan the other day. He gave some tips which I now realize I ignored. But one thing he said is, you gotta these things gotta run quick. Like you don't have the same kind of attention span exactly that you do in a room. That's part of why I wanted just to see people to sort of force the attention. And I didn't. But next time I do this, I'll probably ask a question at the beginning just to get people engaged. That's always something that's useful to do. But I think in this kind of thing, it would be even better. And yeah, there are all these best practices that are coming up. So yeah, we can apply them ourselves. We can discover them. Any other ideas that people have? Kirk.
Hi. Yes. I don't know if I have a good one for creation, except trying to write in this new environment where the issue, it seems like it'd be a simple solution because you're at home all the time. But the problem I'm having are all the other areas of life that you mentioned on there, because for me anyway, I've always liked to go out to like coffee shops or places to write. Now I'm stuck. I work from home all the time, and now I'm always all the time at home. And it's like, I'm sure you have similar issues. So I guess one little thing that I have done is try to romanticize writing again a little bit and try to rejuvenate it. And I listened to a Neil Gaiman podcast with Tim Ferriss.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, and he talked about his fountain pens and some journals. So I got like some journals, and I've written 3 stories in 3 days. And I have an accountability partner that I learned from you, who's pushing me to write every morning, even if it's only 5 minutes. But in the past, I would like go to a coffee shop every morning I got in the habit Monday through Friday of at least 2 hours at a coffee shop. And now that's gone, of course. So,
yeah, I like a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I like all of it, but I want to emphasize a couple of things. So the accountability thing is really important and valuable. And one way to think about this is that we're at such a disadvantage in terms of routines being disrupted, and particularly like no freedom of place, which freedom of place has so many benefits to it, including creatively, both to create where you feel like creating, but also to get away from it. And it's just for part of the acknowledgement is realizing like this is a big setback to have, and then just think about like what kinds of industrial strength conditions can I create that can override this. I mean, people create stuff from prisons. So there are ways of, although in a sense, prison has more movement than we do right now. I just thought of that, but it's really the case for a lot of us. So I mean, accountability, it's like kind of anything you can pile on, like fountain pens, particularly anything healthy that you can pile on, make it happen. But part of acknowledging the difficulty of it is it's helpful because you don't feel so bad about, I'm not as productive as I used to be. Well, yeah, of course, the whole system was wrecked. And I mean, including just we're like constantly bombarded by news about this and developments about this and supposed to make sense of it. And then it's like, I didn't even know now I'm required to wear a mask in our local grocery stores. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I walked to the grocery store, and then I realized, I'm not allowed in because I didn't have a mask. So yeah, they kind of, as many, like the industrial strength conditions, I think of as very, very important. Like any advantage you can give yourself, you need to give yourself right now, but try not to make them like ones with enduring negative consequences, because of course the way many people will cope is through substance, and that's very understandable, but I think not wise. But it's very understandable. Just the amount of misery that's created by these kinds of situations. And so it's part of why I like the idea of thinking of any of these even little triumphs make a huge difference. All right, let's see if we can get one more and then we will sign off. Oh, Nixon. I don't think I've ever heard you speak, and you have such an interesting name.
Thanks, Alex. So if I may, I started a high leverage activity, but it's on the area of reflection.
Okay.
Yeah. So I always thought that it would be interesting to do a journal, and I'm in my early 20s, and I have a lot of things in my life that I want to put order on. So I thought that being explicit with my thinking about my reflection on what kinds of things I want to change in my life and put in order would help on that. So I read an article on Medium about how daily journaling could change your life. That was the title of the article, and I got me thinking about how could I actually start doing that now that I'm confined in my house and I don't have to spend a lot of time in traffic and to go to college and all that. So I started doing it, and this has changed my whole perspective throughout my day, because you once mentioned in your podcast about writing for 20 minutes the first thing in the morning, and that's one of the things that I'm doing, and then I'm writing again before going to bed, and that has helped me a lot on stating the goals and being reflective about really reflecting about my life and being better at seeking my goals, at setting my goals and thinking about them after the day. So that's been something that is really helping me that I hadn't done before.
Awesome. So do you think, are there any conditions you need to set to have you do it in the future, or is it pretty much habit now?
I think the first thing would be to, and this is, to set apart, to select the time I want to do it, because I didn't do it before, because I just, when I woke from bed, I would rush to eat breakfast and to go to college, and then I would. So I think it would be to wake up earlier and to block the time, the time slot in my calendar to do it.
Yeah, that's the only way I know. I can't get anything done. So I just have my girlfriend and I both have these very detailed calendars every half hour with different colors for different areas. And that's the only way I know how to make myself, how to just make sure that the things I want done get done versus all the things that I will not particularly be happy doing. Because obviously the life calendar is always filled up with things. It's just, was it filled up with the things that I wanted it filled up with or not? All right. Well, I really appreciate all of you taking a chance on this. It was really fun, and particularly those of you who stayed 10 minutes late. Again, if you have any kind of feedback and anything you learned, anything positive, negative, just share it with me, alex@alexepstein.com, including if you have any ideas for future things. Oh, Tomer, thank you for that. I just learned how to do that clap thing yesterday on a call. Oh, wow. So, well, that's very, very sweet. So yeah, it was good to see a lot of you in person. And so thanks for coming. And just one final thing is, any little triumph matters so much. And it's not that you're going to feel great or you're going to feel better. And there's a lot of times I don't feel particularly good during this, but just every little time I can improve my life and improve my future, I just find incredibly empowering. And I hope that the worst of this is over in terms of policy in the next month, but I'm not confident that it will be. So let's develop these muscles.
Thank you,
All right,
Al.
everyone.
Thank
Talk
you,
to
Alex.
you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for listening to the Triumphing Over Disruption workshop. I'll just end with my usual kinds of points. If you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, email me at alex@alexepstein.com. Particularly interested in anything you have to say about this kind of live workshop format. Is this something, if you were there or you weren't there, is this something you'd be interested in participating in in the future. We went a little bit through 2 areas out of the 12 today, but we could always go through the others if it's valuable for people, or if you have any other ideas about live types of interactions. I'm definitely open to those. I really liked being able to connect with people visually on Zoom. I think it's particularly important during this time where isolation is often the default. So very open to anything like this that you think would be valuable. Speaking of valuable, if you find this program valuable, there are 2 ways you can support it or pay for it. Number 1 is share it with someone else. So if you found this episode valuable or any other episode valuable, just share it on some platform. I've done very little to promote this show. I've just mainly focused on creating it over the last year and a half, but I know a lot of people value it a lot, and it would be great if you shared it with other people, and that way it would get more reach. Also, if you ever want to pay for this show financially, I've set up a link at paypal.me/humanflourishing. That's paypal.me/humanflourishing. Planning on continuing these weekly episodes because I think it's just so important to support each other and for me to give any kind of useful guidance I can during this disruption. I'm hoping things get better externally, but no matter what, there's a lot of things internally that we can do to make our lives better. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I expect to be with you next week. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.